All right. Well, hey, folks, if you're here with us, Jeff Salzman, Ankur and I, Daily Evolver Live, talking about all things through an integral lens, hopefully, or giving it our best shot. So, Ankur, hit it. What do you got?
All right. So, I don't know that much about this topic, but I think you do. I'm setting you up here, man. All right. I want to talk about the integral take on pornography.
Okay.
But I'm gonna get there through this guy, Mike Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And I read a little bit about Mike Johnson. He's the newly chosen Speaker of the House. And I read his Wikipedia, I read some of his positions, and I read this Guardian takedown, basically. I'm sure that's probably the only way the Guardian's going to approach that guy. But it was really interesting to see all the things that he's known for by the Guardian. And so I got the text open here. I love, and some of the writing, whoever wrote this article for the Guardian, I'm sure it's findable. It's probably on that page. Did a great job. In thrall of Baroque and morbid religious fantasies, beholden to a regressive, bigoted, and morbid worldview. I guess that's morbid twice in the same sentence. And above all, obsessed with a lurid and creepy enthusiasm with sex and how he thinks it should be done. I don't know if any of that's true, but I think it's good writing. But he definitely worked against gay marriage and to uphold Louisiana's criminal ban on gay sex. He's really anti-homosexual and anti-homosexuality. He still opposes marriage equality. This, that, and the other thing. But one thing I thought was interesting, have you heard of covenant marriages?
Yes.
Yeah. So I learned about covenant marriages, and I think that's pretty cool.
I do too.
Yeah. It's just like, it seems like a very evolved, in France, you know about paxing in France?
No.
So they have this thing called paxing, which basically gives you all the legal rights of a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do it with your brother, your sister. It's just like, these are the things that, like, it's really important when you die that someone knows, has this financial and administrative relationship to you. Mm-hmm. Or for your taxes while you're alive, then like you have a household and certain things happen differently. And we want to give credits to people if they have a household. So they've just totally abstracted that from this idea of marriage and love and sex and this and that. It's just like administrative designation of a household.
Yeah.
It's called paxing. And what I like about this covenant marriage thing is to me, it feels like it's getting a little bit in the same direction.
Yeah.
Where it's like the religious homies are accepting, like, we lost the marriage battle. Turns out it's a secular thing. We have to create our own more religious-y version of it and have that recognized by people. Why it has to be recognized by the state is like different than something else. There's like some room there. But for those of you who don't know about covenant marriages, it's so the Guardian calls it this. This is really funny. The Guardian says it's a religious arrangement that formalizes men's superiority and constricts women's freedom to leave, designed for conservative straight couples who feel that no-fault divorce and gay marriage rights degrade their own unions. When I looked at what a covenant marriage was on Wikipedia, it's very different. But basically, this idea of a no-fault divorce, that someone, generally the woman, could leave the partnership without having to prove something, that was a new idea that feminists brought us in the 60s, and it allows women to just be like, peace out whenever they want. And men, it's just like, all right. And so they're the covenant marriage is like, man, that is destroying our society, that people can just leave marriages when things get difficult.
Yeah.
And so people voluntarily, supposedly, who knows how it actually works out, but voluntarily agree to more stricter rules on when you can leave. And so basically you have to prove adultery or prove abuse, physical or sexual, prove that maybe you haven't lived together for a couple of years. It's basically a supposedly voluntary higher standard.
Yeah.
And of course, because it's the modern legal system, there's all kinds of loopholes. And if someone just moves to a state that doesn't recognize covenant marriages, and there's only 3 that recognize them right now, then they're covered by that state's marital law, and then they could just bail at any point. So it seems more like a club that people want to join. What's unclear to me is whether both people actually want to join it at that time when they agreed to it. But anyhow, in general, I think it's a cool idea that there's just like different kinds of marriages, and it just, the further it gets from the state, I think the healthier it is, and that we should all have like our different like moral codes that fit our little individual cultures, but why have them enshrined, in the state?
Yeah. No, I think that it's a pretty good example of a sort of an integral move in the culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, people can have a literally traditional level marriage, and have it in this bigger container of a secular culture in a postmodern world and all of this kind of thing. And they can opt in. Nobody's making anybody do anything. And so, it's harder for them to get divorced. They have to work through things in a way that people who can walk away easily don't. And that's their argument for it. And it also calls into play their faith. And they're religious people. They think being married is something that you commit to and you stay with it forever. And it's, even into the afterlife. So, so I like it for that reason. So I think we're good on the covenant marriage, right?
Yeah. So, and then the last thing, this is all kind of like preface on Mike Johnson.
Yep.
But then there's this thing that blew up a couple of weeks ago or recently about pornography. Yeah. Did you hear about this?
Yes.
How he uses this app, also with the word covenant eyes. Yep. Just super creepy as a name, I gotta say. Where you can install it on your devices and it just scans all of your internet traffic for pornography or anything it considers uncool, which in the example he gave, he was giving some talk called it was a conference, something about like being against technology. It's just like it's like some kind of anti-technology conference. And he gave this example of like how it was flagged, his son. So he's accountability partners with his son, his teenage son, on this app. And so they're tracking each other's pornography use. And he's like, yeah, my son has been cool. Nothing's been flagged, except once this image was flagged of these two, and it's kind of blurry at first, but these two images, these two women. And so I like unblurred it to see what he was looking at. And they were just two fully clothed teachers, Yeah. So the fact that the app thinks women together is pornographic, it's like, okay, great, covenant eyes. But in general, and he's being like destroyed for this probably in mainstream media. But I, in my like naive wanting to be positive self, I felt like it was pretty cool that he was addressing his pornography addiction or whatever, some sort of thing with pornography that he felt was negative for him, and he wanted to make strides towards being positive in the public sphere and being honest with his son about it. There's some real vulnerability and desire for connection there.
Yeah.
That
I agree.
That I appreciate.
I do too. I think it's in the plus column for me with Mike Johnson. What Mike Johnson is a traditional guy. His ethics, his worldview is Christian traditional. He's a Bible-believing Christian, and that that lights up his life. That means his life is meaningful. He knows who he is. His famous answer. By the way, this is the new Speaker of the House we're talking about. I'm not sure that we have identified that. This is the third in line to the presidency. This is Mike Johnson. He's now the newly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives. And when somebody asked him his worldview, he said, the Bible, the New Testament is my worldview. And so that's pretty frank. And there's, upsides and downsides of that. From a secular position, he's going to be, he's probably in his heart a theocrat. He would like to reform the country to more Christian standards, like it was, back in the days before modernity and secular culture came on and killed God.
but it actually never was in this country. Like it was like, at least we had the rhetoric from the beginning of being secular, and some of the things like coincided a little bit. But it never, like that was never the project here.
Yeah.
It's not like the Holy Roman Empire where that was the project for a while.
Right. You're talking about religious freedom, or no, the government can't make laws regarding religion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That is a founding.
Like theocracy is not like going back to the origin of this country.
No, it's not. You're right. You're right.
Just want to be clear about that.
That's a very, very good point, and thank you for correcting me on that, because culturally there was a sort of a hegemony of Christian. Being gay wasn't cool. I mean, when I was a kid and I was a little gay kid, it wasn't gay to be cool. You couldn't even talk about it. Couldn't even think about it.
So I'm curious though, given that reality and that you grew up in this Christian traditional context, does it just fill you with fear to see this guy being third in line in the presidency? Where he just
it probably alleviates my fear more so than people who didn't grow up that way, because I know that there is I don't even want to call it hypocrisy, but a lot of people who they're sort of Bible believing Christians, when push comes to shove, they really don't want to kill homosexuals, but that's what the New Testament says to do. The Apostle Paul, if you lie with a man, you should be put to death. The Old Testament is full of it, but the New Testament isn't immune. And also that women should listen to their husband. There's all kinds of things that people who think they believe in the Bible don't really practice. And it's an interesting thing, this evolution, because, a secular morality is now the container in which theocratic ideas are held. And so I'm not afraid of them taking over. That ship has sailed. You can't uncook that egg of secular modernity and multicultural America and so forth. So he's fighting a rear grade battle. And I want to make sure that he doesn't, I would fight him against any laws that would be theocratic or anything like that. But in terms of how he lives and living a life that is lit up by the presence of God, I'm all for that. I'm excited about that there's somebody really is trying to live that way. And one of the things that secular culture doesn't appreciate, like traditional culture does, is the poisonous quality of pornography. Pornography is a very big deal to traditionalists.
Well, it's also a very big deal to the internet.
It's a very big deal to everybody.
It's like there's a lot of pornography.
There's a lot of pornography, and that a kid can get a hold of it is just shocking to me. I mean, it's like, do you remember the big election when we voted that pornography should be pumped down from the satellites into every computer in the face of the earth? No, we never had that. We never had that election. But that is what's happened in the West. And, it's one of the reasons that traditional cultures like Arabs and Muslims and, these sort of pre-modern traditional countries, that's one of the reasons they see us as a great Satan. Look what we're pumping into the minds of their kids. It's shocking, actually, Ankur. And it is dangerous. And more and more people are getting hip to the dangers of it. And the example I would use is that it's like when the food supply was industrialized. It's all of a sudden the millennial-old hunt for calories, which had been the orienting principle of all life, basically, and human life too. All of a sudden, our homes are filled with these, empty calories, but they're still calories, so we could OD on junk food, and we do. And so we have an obesity and we have the diabetes and all that good stuff. So pornography is kind of like that in a way. It's the junk food version of this really deep embedded drive for sex. And so it can overwhelm the psyche. And so we have men who can't function without porn with their wives and their boyfriends. So you get you get into a porn cycle where you're finding just the right thing that turns you on, and you get porn brain. Dopamine hits, click after click after click. What other person can hold up to that?
Yeah.
course they can, and and people are still functioning, but you see young people having less sex. One of the reasons why is because they're having a lot more sex, only it's in their bedroom. So Christians are very hip to this. Christian psychology deals a lot. There's a lot of men's groups where they're working together to limit their pornography use. There's what do they call it? It's part of the AAA groups. It's sex addicts, basically. Pornography is definitely a subject of sex addiction. The Guardian is going to do its hit job. First of all, it's fun. It's funny to see this. Mike Johnson comes out of nowhere, right? We don't even know who he is, and to see how the liberal industrial complex tries to create this sort of enemy for us, so he's creepy, and he's got this porn thing with his kid. How creepy could that be, And then this covenant marriage. How creepy is that? And going back and it is
interesting because this article, and I've read The Guardian for years, ever since I discovered Robert Fisk, and I'm just in general I'm down. But it's interesting that every point they make in this article, I think is a good point. It's like stuff that like, I'm scared of this dude. I don't want this guy in power, given what his beliefs are.
Yeah.
But they just overblow it. So like adding the creepy thing is just totally not necessary. Where it's like, just look at the voting record. It's enough.
Plenty to oppose here.
Yeah.
Trump didn't lose. Let's start there.
Yeah. Like voting to overturn the election. Why does he have to be creepy? I mean, he's already creepy just in general, right? So yeah, and it doesn't help me trust the Guardian, or like you're saying, that like the media industrial complex, to have it be just like so. I mean, it just it's just like overboard.
Aren't we bored with that at this point?
Yeah,
I think a lot of us are bored with that, Encore.
Yeah,
and so, and that itself is a change that's the evolution. So we're seeing that. Wait a second, these Christian people, they actually, and fundamentalists of all stripes, they actually have a point. There is something to self-discipline, and there's something to obedience, and there's something to honor and being a good person and being a father and a mother. And
that's true. But I think I wonder if you're reacting to this and being a little bit too charitable. So there's two ways in which I see that in your response. One is, I don't know if you know anything about this guy's actual life beyond the voting record and the media stuff, but you're making assumptions that he is enchanted by like the divine spirit, where most fundamentalist religious people are not necessarily. They're just involved in a set of really harsh rules and really unhappy. And I think of one of my favorite movies from childhood, Inherit the Wind. You remember that? About the Scopes monkey trial?
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Old school. I don't know if it's like the 40s or I don't know. It's black and white. So I don't know when. But it was such a beautiful movie about this courtroom drama between William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow. And there's this minister in it who's like the fundamentalist minister, and his daughter is maybe dating this evolution teacher, the high school biology teacher. And that guy is a fundamentalist dude, and he is not a happy camper. He is not just like, oh, I'm just so full of the Holy Spirit and let's like dance to reggae music. It's really just, he's not putting the fun back in fundamentalism. So like making this assumption that Mike Johnson is like that, I don't know. I mean, maybe he is. Maybe like the dinner blessings at his house are 10 minutes and everyone's crying. And maybe it's just like the empty shell of religion. Like that is why so many of us were turned off of it. So that's one question I have. And the second is what you said about discipline. And like I do agree. I don't know if agree is the right word. It resonates with me a lot of the traditional values now that I'm older and I've lived my life, and I'm like, oh yeah, like in the working world, most people do not do what they say. They do not show up on time. They do not say please. You can't count on them for just the most basic shit. And all those people, when I was a kid, being like, it's so hard to find good workers and just honor your word. I'm like, oh, they were right. That's actually rare. I didn't know that. It's actually rare. So that's, I believe in some of that. But this idea that the religious people who are anti-pornography or anti-sexual freedom are doing so out of an enlightened notion of discipline and what that does for them, and not just fear, is not clear to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it could be that they're there, or it could be that where we are now is fundamentally different from where they are, but even though it looks the same on the surface.
Yeah. I think, both of those things are happening. People are obedient out of fear. They feel like every time they look at porn, they have sinned and God's watching them. And, modernity wanted to throw that off and did. What it threw off, it's the baby bathwater thing. It also totally threw off sort of healthy discipline, and totally. Sexual freedom became something that, there's a price that society has paid for that. I think it was a worth it price. I think it was the evolutionary move that had its downsides. Family got kind of, deprioritized, if you will. But in Integral, the move is to see what we can bring back. So we do want a re-enchanted world. We want a world where we're not marinating in pornography and junk food. And, so we're working our way to that. I don't know Mike Johnson's interiors very well, but, he adopted a black son. He is, he tries to be a good person. I don't know that much about him, but, the idea that he's a racist bigot, it's funny when these white Christians adopt black kids. It's, there's a critique of that, of course, but there's also, they're doing a good thing if they're good parents.
Well, okay. I can bring in a little specified knowledge on this, and I have a friend of mine. Her name is Karen Thomas. Yep. She was transracially adopted, mm-hmm. and she is now like a teacher about transracial adoption. Mm-hmm. And so I think, if I could channel her in this moment, I think she would say it could be a good thing, but it has to be done in a certain way, right? And that's what she does, is she helps people figure out the trauma when it wasn't done well and like rebuild from that, and also help people who are doing it now do it in a better way. So I think there is that potential, but it's not always the case.
Yeah, and we don't know with him. The other piece is the political, that he's a Trumper, and that he, has defended Trump, and he tried to, do what he could to. He voted for Trump with Trump on all of this election bullshit, and that's alarming to me. That's what's alarming to me, and that also is a piece with this fundamentalist Christian worldview that is seeing, I don't know where he fits in this, but there is a strain of the Christian fundamentalism that thinks that the United States is so far gone, the pornography, pumping into the everything, the family, secularism, disbelief, that democracy isn't going to work anymore. And that there is a need for a new, there's this Bronze Age pervert, these books that people are writing that make the case for literally theocracy, monarchy. They really want to go back to something that they want to take the society back to a theocratic, not that the United States ever was. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
So that's a serious, like the Claremont Institute. That's a serious intellectual movement. How much traction that will get, I don't know, but that he would be in any way, well, he is flirting with that because Trump is a natural autocrat. And to the degree that you support his tendencies, you could separate some of his policies that you could support, but to the degree that you support Trump as your standard bearer, and that it would be this Manhattan libertine that would be the leader the standard bearer of the Christian right. You couldn't make this up. If you wrote this in a screenplay, they'd kick it back and say, this doesn't make sense.
That's what I really don't get. I mean, not that I get a lot about what's going on out there, but with the fundamentalist people being allied with Trump, it just seems anti. Like if you're being so charitable with traditional values, you're being so, most people in your position would be like, these people are all hypocrites, and you're being so giving and loving and charitable. But when you see that like they're allied with Trump, given what they want their daughters to do and what they want their daughters not to do, and what Trump does, and it's just like, how is there any? I mean, it's just so.
Here's how I can make some sense of it. Yeah. The enemy of their end, they share the enemy. So Trump,
but that's not what values is. That's not what values is. Like I'm a student of Gandhi.
Okay.
Gandhi's telling me to tell the truth. Right. He's not telling me to tell the truth when it's convenient, or to ally with the enemy of my enemy. Yeah. They're coming from a similar, developmental moral strata that Gandhi is. I think Gandhi was very integral, but that whole thing of values are important.
Well, no, they aren't. I mean, they're coming from, when you're a fundamentalist Christian, the devil is afoot. You're not sitting down with the devil and making a deal. You're defeating the devil. And so there is an enemy, a capital E enemy afoot. And Gandhi you're right, he was integral. But a fundamentalist Christian absolutely sees the world beset by the minions of evil itself. And it doesn't even have to be, well, first how does that sit with you?
I'm still, maybe I'm just too much of a mystic, but the idea that they would compromise their relationship with the devil within by violating one of their principles in the Ten Commandments to attack the devil without seems to me like a fundamental betrayal of the promise of religion.
Yeah, well, they sort it out. They work it out. They don't feel like they're lying. They have this whole thing about, you don't have to believe all of Trump's bullshit to make a case that that we had the ballots and the harvesting, and there was this one and that one. They can work it out to their own satisfaction.
The other point, a kind of contradiction that I'm curious in what you think about. You talked about the pornography being pumped to us. It's very clear why that's happening, and in Allen Ginsberg's words, it's the one-eyed shrew of the heterosexual market. It's money.
I was going to say, it's money. Yes, that's why.
It's money. We have a market system with some constraints. There's you can't have violent child pornography and stuff. There's some constraints, which you could see as coming from a moral or theocratic, or you could see just justice for children, personal protection background. But there's very few constraints on what gets bought and sold. And so are these people? Are they they're just not, they're kind of a theo-communist kind of world? They're not into the market system, or what's their, do you know about that?
Yeah, well, some of them, they're certainly not into a free market for pornography. That would be for sure. And it's we do draw lines with pornography, as you just pointed out. It's just that they would want the line drawn to basically get rid of it. Although not maybe for them, maybe they could keep some magazines just in the shed, or maybe they. But I do think there was a proposal way back when that we would have all pornography would be under .xxx. There's .com, there's .net, there's .this, there's .that, and .xxx would be, if you're going to do pornography, it's going to have to go in there, and then that would be far more easy to regulate, keep away from kids. But
seems pretty reasonable to me.
Seems pretty reasonable to me. But it didn't happen, and because of money. And so there's there we go.
Yeah. I mean, that's really so much of this has to do with the lack of creativity and imagination. Just if they're worried, if whoever the capitalist pornographers are worried that they're going to lose money because places are going to ban .xxx, there's just like hundreds of services that will allow you to get around that. So it's like they're not going to lose any money.
It's hopeless.
People are obsessed with, they want the porn. Most of the internet is porn.
Give
Nothing
me
is going
the
to stop
porn.
that. It's like they don't have anything to fear. They're like you.
Actually, again, from an evolutionary point of view, it's like social media. If we knew 20 years ago what we know now, maybe we'd have done differently. Same with porn. But the idea that there's going to be a free expression of sexuality in this virtual world, absolutely evolutionarily on target. It's what's gonna, it's next. And we're going to be different people as a result of it. And we're going to have to learn how to not, gorge on it and become, morbidly obese from porn. And we're learning that. And part of it is, actually, I would say that these Christian men particularly are in the vanguard of that. I mean, it's a big deal among Christian men.
Yeah, that's where I don't agree. I mean, there's a lot of people in this anti-pornography movement, but for me, what being in the vanguard means is having access and not doing it. And it's like with we've come to a point with food, like I've retrained myself with food where I'll have gummy bears on a hike, 1 per mile usually, but otherwise I have access to unlimited candy and I don't eat it. What's that?
I said, really? How do you do that?
How do I do what?
Have unlimited candy and not eat it.
I mean, it's just in the store. You can go anytime you want.
I'm just kind of kidding. Because I had a half a bowl of candy that I didn't give out at Halloween, and anyway.
Yeah, and when people bring it over,
it took me a week to eat it, but I did eat it.
Yeah, when people bring it over, I just throw it away. So.
Yeah. No, I did. Yeah. No, but we're learning this, and we're doing it because we want to feel healthy. We feel healthy in real time when we don't eat 3 candy bars, right? And there's a corollary to that with porn. If you could clear out porn, there is a new sort of juiciness that comes online sexually. I've worked with it myself. I mean, this is at least my experience. So where I'd say they're in the vanguard is that they see the problem. They actually have a lot of these men's groups and psychological, and there's these apps and whatever, where they're actually working with it. Now, the degree that they want to be totalitarian and take it away from us, that's that we can tease those two things apart. That's integral. We can see the part that makes sense and the part that doesn't.
Yeah, and I guess just to put a little finer point on it, I think what success looks like, and this is when something is an addiction, I think it's very different. And we'd have to call Gabor Mate in because I don't really understand addiction in any way except for what I read in his books. But what success to me looks like is having things like having market. I mean, to go back to the free market thing, having the demand decline. Like when demand for conventional vegetables declines and demand for organic vegetables increases, we know that we've made success as a culture.
Yeah.
When demand for Coca-Cola declines, we know that we'll have got somewhere as a culture, not because we're preventing people from drinking Coca-Cola.
Right.
And I think it's the same, to the extent that we have accountability groups. It's the idea is not, to me, success. I mean, you might need these censorship apps in the short term, but success in the long term looks like I'm not censoring myself. I'm actually just don't have the endogenous desire anymore. My needs are met through my relationships, so that I don't need to look at robots.
Yeah. Great discussion. Really good discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on this Mike Johnson, right?
Yeah, I'm sure many people will. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. All right, my friend. Well, thanks, everybody. And thank you, Ankur the Light, 10,000 Heroes podcast. And thank you for joining me in the Daily Evolver.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Right. See you later.